Welcome back to another episode of the Heroes Veritas podcast. I'm your host, Tim Bass, and today I'm joined by Aaron Thorpe, shadow coach, shaman, newly author, Powerleveling in Real Life. Just came out with this book, great book. This man is a wealth of knowledge in spirituality and getting past traumas and getting the work done in the darker regions of our recesses of our mind. So, Aaron, thanks for joining me, brother.
Thanks for having me on. I am really excited to be here.
I am very excited to have you here as well. I mean, you and I, we connected at the Lion's Den through Sean Whalen, and then just kind of became battle buddies from another life because we were both Marines. We both served in the same places, but at different times. And we immediately hit it off and immediately connected and have had a multitude of deep conversations. So I knew as soon as we connected at that level that I really needed to have you on. And what better time than with the celebratory release of your book?
That actually had a lot to do with, I guess, what drove me to write this, right? Was, we connected so well, and what I saw you doing, right? So this was cool was, here's this Marine I met that had similar experiences, kind of a similar childhood in the way that, we both kind of went through hard times, right? Had this experience in the military that taught you all these valuable lessons. And what you were doing with it was, turning that around and then, teaching other men how to, build their confidence, kind of take back their power, stand in their dominion kind of thing. So that was really cool. Right. And then, as you and I kind of had this experience at that event, right, we were able to talk to a lot of people, share, just add value, right? That's what we were doing, was just going around and adding value. So, and a lot of that was, me just kind of telling people my story. People would kind of talk to me about their trauma. And that's, I guess, something I'm gifted with, is when people approach me or I have kind of, one-on-one conversations with people, for whatever reason, people will kind of tell me the deepest, darkest things, or, kind of these terrible things that happen to them. And it's me having gone through what I went through. It really opened me up to, sharing that. And then they were able to kind of look at their circumstances a little bit differently and say, well, gosh, it's not that it wasn't so bad, or, oh, I just need to get over it. It's like, hey, this happened for a reason, and it taught me some really valuable shit. Right. So, modern psychology or Western psychology, psychobabble is kind of focused on like, oh, how did that make you feel? And, that wasn't your fault. And, let's just kind of get back that. Why would they do that? Or let's understand this. And, so that's also what drove me to write this, was that I had been through that, right? I've been through, when I got back from Iraq, I was in the VA system for, almost 10 years. I had 2 psychiatrists a week. I would talk about these things. And it's like, it almost seemed to like make me worse, or kind of dive more into these escapist tactics of, I'd go isolate, or I'd go drink, or I'd go, do drugs or whatever. So, I'm kind of watching you in there.
Right.
What's that?
Every time you start to get out, whether it's through escapism or whatever, hey, talk about it and bring you back into it. And then you're in a cycle of escapism to then go back to it, to relive it, to then escapism. And it creates this very unhealthy identity-based system with your trauma, where you're now bonded to it as a person, almost like that's your character, right? Like that's who you're playing now, which I really like the title of the book, obviously, Powerleveling, because we've talked about kind of Heroes Veritas and kind of the character that we play in. And a lot of times when we have trauma, it becomes the character that we're playing, right? And then we don't know how to get to that next level. We don't know how to move to the next version of that character and start leveraging the experience for the positive. We get stuck in this negative cycle of, let me run from it, then I'll kind of dive back into it when I have to, and then run from it again. And kind of just becomes your identity, is like, I'm this trauma case that went through these hellish experiences, and therefore that's all I'm good for. So I'm going to tell that story all the time.
Sure. Like I like to liken a lot of our lives to video games, right? So, imagine you're playing Skyrim, and in story mode, you have to go fight, whatever boss it is. And then if in the game, you're like, well, I just don't want to fight that guy. Well, that's fine, but you will never finish that story.
Mm-hmm.
If you just kind of identify with level 2 and then stay at level 2, you're going to act like a level 2 character forever. Right. And so you're right. This trauma happens to us, but a lot of times we just bond with it. Like, well, I'm just going to stay right here and not go fight that. And, we shove skeletons in our closet, so to speak. But what we don't realize is that's actually holding us back. That's a boss you had to go fight so you could get the experience and then move on to the next level. But if you're too afraid to go, face that experience down and kind of draw from it what you can or what valuable lessons life was trying to teach you, that's where you stay. And like you say, like in life, we become trauma bonded to, whatever experience. And you see this a lot. People, as they reach, their older years, they tend to start to just talk about things on repeat. Like, oh, this terrible thing happened. Life was so great then, but this just sucked. And it's, every time you see this person, they're kind of replaying the same things in their head just over and over and over again. Like, this is what happened. And I get it. Like, it's scary. It hurts. It's hard to kind of process. But that's where you find all that experience. Right. And so, in the, I don't know how much you want me to go into, all the different chapters, this soon, but that's kind of what I wanted to share was, I ran from my PTSD for a long time, right? I ran from it. I didn't want to accept that, growing up in a religion where I would walk around every Saturday and I drank the Kool-Aid hard, man. I drank the Kool-Aid hard. I'd walk around every Saturday, talk to people about how amazing Jesus was going to make the world. And we should all just hug, kiss, love each other. Nothing's wrong. And then kind of within 2 years of being, leaving or being removed from everything I knew in my life, like I'm now in Fallujah, Iraq, seeing terrible things happen. Right. And so that was a huge challenge to my identity, right? Like I had grown up believing I was this, passive Christian, just love everybody, wouldn't hurt a fly. And then I'm participating in some crazy shit. Right.
And so David.
What's that?
Said, and then you found out you're David.
Yeah. David just complete, right. You're staring down just it's very frightening. Right. And then returning home from that, there's things you just don't want to accept about it. Like, oh, that was bullshit. I shouldn't have been there. Shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have this, shouldn't have this. Fuck that. That's, and it's what I was doing was running from it and running from kind of the things I had done. Right. Because I couldn't reconcile them. Right. I talked to my lieutenant a few times over the years and we were kind of talking about PTSD, and there's something a phrase he said really stuck with me. And it was, how do you make sense of that which just doesn't make sense? And that's how it felt was, you can't really understand in the context of being in this crazy environment and seeing, kind of war play out. And then you come home and everyone's kind of just hunky dory. You're trying to reconcile two worlds, right? So again, I ran from that. I'd run through it, from pills, drinking, sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? Anything you can do to kind of get away from it. But, my experience it was really my experience in ayahuasca that kind of cured that, which was, it showed me that I had to sit there and face that thing I was running from, right? Like I didn't want to believe I was that person. I didn't want to believe that I could do these things to people. Right. Because it scared the shit out of me as a kid growing up. And then, this sudden scene change. And then, it attacked my identity in a way. And I just wanted to reject it. And so it showed me that you have to sit down with that. Like, and it's not something you're sitting there judging yourself. And I think that's where people, that's where we get most stuck in our trauma, is that we sit there and try to judge the people we were or the people in it. Or,
there's no grace
for the victim mentality.
Yeah, there's no grace for doing the best you could with the information you had at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Or things like my parents, right? Like I sat there and beat them up for a long time, but my grandfather was way worse than my dad, so I have to give the guy credit because he made an improvement. Mm-hmm. It's still not something that at way back then that I was like, oh, that was awesome, which now I understand those lessons. Mm-hmm. Right. That's exactly what I needed. Right. It was just human training on a little bit harder mode to teach me certain things that I would now be able to use. Right. So like if I go talk to someone who's Christian, I mean, I know the Bible like the back of my hand, right? And so I could sit there and curse the fact that I was in this, system that was constantly reading the Bible or constantly analyzing all these scriptures. But now what I realize is it actually gave me a lot of tools to help people because they get caught on some, spiritual principles or, well, the Bible says this or the Bible says that. And so that's given me the ability to say, well, hey, what if you looked at it this way? Right? Like, there's no need to judge yourself or, you know what I mean? It's just given me tools. So
Yeah, and like
that,
that's one of the areas that you and I get stuck, right? Like, because I'm a very devout Christian. I was raised Catholic and then became Christian of my own accord, and then read the Bible a few times on my own just because I wanted to. I'm the type of person that needs to know, right? Like I don't want to speak from ignorance, and so you and I we've clashed out of respect for each other with different viewpoints and philosophies, and there's areas where I agree with you, and there's areas where I don't agree with you, or maybe we have different perspectives on that. But to your point, if you were to look at the glass mirror, right, the magic mirror on the wall, and say, now that I know everything about everything, because I have, the world in my pocket of knowledge, I now get the right to chastise myself for being stuck in the Kool-Aid or stuck in with the pasture and believing everything they said or, whatever the case is. And what I hear you saying is like, you got to give yourself the grace to know that you know more now than you did then and give that same grace to others that they only did what they did based on the knowledge they had at the time. So you can't go backwards with new knowledge and try and audit that with the new knowledge. You have to audit with where they were, not where they are now.
and to your point, right? Immediately after it happens, that's new knowledge.
Right.
Right. So then again, we get stuck, something happens, we experience an emotion, and then we formulate this opinion about this event. That was new knowledge, right? So again, it's that act of judging as opposed to, you're right, like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? This was good or bad. It's, hey, what can I take out of this? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what did it teach me? Because that's the most important part. It's, life's going to happen, and it doesn't matter. It does not matter how much knowledge you were to gain. If something happened to you at the age of 20 and you spent the next 40 years analyzing that event, it's not going to change it.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no amount of analyzing or judging that's going to change the event that happened, period. So it's, that experience that I kind of go through in detail in ayahuasca was, you had to accept that, like, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can tell yourself that's going to change these actions. Absolutely nothing. What you
Yeah.
can do, though, is, what did you learn from that? And like, what understanding did it bring you of yourself? So that's another thing I talk about. Like, because I went through this experience in the Marine Corps, like, I was raised, something you talk about, right? Like, where they're trying to over feminize men or make men very weak. Like, that's exactly what the religion did. It turned, all of them into just nice guys. Yay, have whatever you want. Now, the Marine Corps took my fucking pudgy ass and then beat me into something solid that could then go, jump over a house and do some ninja shit, right? Like, that taught me a lot of cool things, right? And so that showed me that was a part of me.
Right.
Now, that part of me had a lot of dangerous capability. And so it's on me to make those choices to say, gosh, is this something I want to use to hurt or enslave or, do or, enact my will upon others? Or is that something I can just know I have? I'm sorry?
Yeah, you now have the responsibility of power.
Yes.
Whereas when you're a nice guy, you have no responsibility of power because you're weak. And so this is something that I know a lot of philosophers over the ages have talked about, where if a man is not capable of great violence, then he is neither, good because he's not capable of bad. Right. So like, in order to be good, you have to have the transverse, which you and I have talked about, good versus evil and can one exist without the other, which, we've taken down those philosophical and spiritual conversations many times. And kind of segueing into the book is that chapter on darkness, right? Like, you can't have light without the darkness. And that's something you and I have talked about as well. And I really like that you added that part in your book. When it comes to traumas, you have to confront it. You have to sit in it, but you don't wallow in it, which is something you and I have talked about. Like, you sit in it and you learn from it, but it's an active sit, right? Or as I like to say, I pace in my darkness, right? Like, I sit in my darkness, but I'm walking around in the darkness. I'm trying to find lessons and nuggets of truth and things in it, right? Because there's always something in there. And so that chapter that you added on darkness, I'd like you to speak to a little bit more, because I feel like a lot of people need to understand what that darkness is and how much good can come of it.
So I talked a little bit about it, describing that journey with ayahuasca, right? But let's look at it in like its most, I guess, mundane form, right? Or the simplest form, right? So, let's say for whatever reason, I'm like, gosh darn it, Tim, you're wearing the dumbest shoes ever, right? Now, you obviously know that's true. I can't see your shoes. I don't know what they are. They're probably pretty cool, but just saying. Ever. What's that?
They're the dumbest shoes ever.
Oh. Well, if that were to hurt your feelings, right? So let's say right. I say this and it causes an emotional reaction in you. Okay. That's telling you something, right? There is something that you are taking offense to. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's where the darkness is. Anything that's going to cause like this negative emotion, or this thing that, kind of for comfort reasons we want to run away from. That's what I'm saying. Like, no. Go into that. Ask yourself, why does it matter if Aaron says my shoes are dumb? Right. And I know this seems like a very simple, complex or idea, right? But it's vitally important, because even those little things, that's exactly what we're talking about, is that, there's something that causes pain, and instead of running from it, like, run towards it. Why do I care if, Aaron says my shoes are dumb? Well, gosh, why do I care about that? And you sit there and think about it, and you think about it and think about it. And who knows, it might be that when you were 10 years old, you went to school and it was like the first day of school and you were super excited because you just had your new kicks on and you were going to go show the girl that you had a crush on your brand new shoes. And then as you were walking up to her, somebody was like, hey, look at Tim's dumb shoes, right? And you're like, oh, and it hurts your feelings.
I've experienced
right? So
that.
now
being pulled up.
It wasn't my shoes. It was usually my shirt. But
it was always my shoes because they were from Kmart. Nobody likes Kmart where I was from. So I know exactly. I never cared. And it's one of the things, playing devil's advocate a little bit here with what you're saying is like run at those, the things that you want to run from, right? I've seen a lot, and I've coached a lot of guys who do this, where they take that advice to a complacent extreme, where they're like, yeah, I'm gonna run at it, I'm gonna confront it, but they're not actually fighting the demons, for lack of a better term. They're just kind of like playing patty cake with it, where they're like, I'm uncomfortable, so I'm gonna go and sit in it, and then they're just pissy, and then they're just wallowing, and then they're just like, my life is so bad, right? As opposed to what I feel like you're saying is audit those feelings, not run at the trauma, right? Like if you want to run away from it, audit why you want to run away from it. Sit with the feeling and the emotions and dealing with it, right? Mm-hmm. But what I see a lot of people do is what they've conflated is they're going to go and relive that trauma over and over and over again as their way of, right? Like their way of auditing, but they don't do the question part of why is it bothering me? How do I move forward? So the devil's advocate part is like, how would you address somebody who thinks that they're addressing it because they felt uncomfortable, so they go to it and they sit with it, but they're not auditing, they're just wallowing?
Well, so in my experience, there's going to be some wallowing, right? Because now as you start chasing these things back, right, you can get mad at me because I called your shoes stupid. But if there's a memory from your childhood that truly is traumatic, that's a lot more painful than maybe, Susie Q not noticing your shoes. And so, I'll give you an example. When there was me and my wife have we've been together a long time, right? And so I had picked up a lot of, I guess, emotional habits over the years, and I couldn't really understand, like, it's like I would cause problems because I felt she wasn't doing enough for me, when really these were kind of things I was making up, right? Mm-hmm. And I started chasing that. Like, first off, I had to be aware of it, right? And so, it's funny. There was some conversation we were having where something she said just kind of made me aware of what I was doing, right? And so once I was aware of it, that's kind of the hardest part, is you have to start auditing yourself to where you're now aware of kind of these unconscious behaviors. So anyway, she made me aware of it, and I really start, just thinking about that. Like, man, why do I do these things? Why do I feel like I'm not good enough? Why do I feel like, and that kind of took me down this road, and this lasted a while of just thinking, trying to chase these emotions. Now, while that's happening, my behavior almost kind of got worse, right? So, understand, like, if you're going through that, first off, give yourself some grace, because you just opened Pandora's box inside, and things might be coming out, and it's like you may be acting out subconsciously or unconsciously as your body's trying to process whatever it is, as you're getting closer and closer to that pain point, right? Or that trauma. But there was a moment where I finally realized, like, I described this in my book, I don't have a relationship with my parents. And, for me, it kind of came to this point where, and I was on the ground, like in the fetal position, crying, because I realized, like, really what I wanted from my wife was, I just wanted my mom to tell me I was doing a good job in life. Like, I missed my mom. Like, that's why I would sit here and try to nag her so much, as to, why aren't you showing me attention? Why aren't you showing me affection? And that took me back to, it's like a very Freudian moment, right? Where it's like, fuck, I miss my mom. And like, I fell apart, and I cried, and I was very, kind of disengaged for a couple days, just not talking to anyone, really kind of processing. So first, it can look like sometimes it takes a while to do shadow work, but that's because it does. Like, things are going to come out. You're going to have to feel it. You're going to have your burn it all down days. You're going to have a let's run from it again. But it's just that slow progression of chasing those things. And that's kind of why I wrote that darkness, was that, ayahuasca helped me run down that road almost immediately. Right. Like that really just got me straight into the point, like, hey, sit here and face what you did. And, I don't think it's valuable for someone to kind of this Western model of psychotherapy, where it's like, let's just get you up on a talking plan for the rest of your life, and then we'll give you some pills for the rest of your life. I don't think that's helpful either. Like I said, you got to sit there and chase that and figure that out and really sit with it, because everyone has their own experiences. You can kind of give them a step-by-step kind of way to get there. But, when you walk into the cave and Darth Vader's waiting for you, you're going to have that fight. When Yoda's like, Luke's like, I'm not afraid. And he's like, you will be. Yeah. And then he goes in there and he finds out it's himself. So that's the other point, is that, he cuts off Vader's head, and then the thing falls off, and it's actually Luke. So his demons were just him. Right. That was kind of the
demons, right? That's a
yes.
piece, right? It was like, how do we want to portray as that caricature or character when we're fearing something, right? Like, something that's always stuck to me is we lie for only two reasons: seek pleasure or from fear. And so the fear part is more like 90% of the reason. Like, people that lie, they lie 10% of the reason for pleasure, right? Guys trying to get with a new girl or whatever, right? But more deeply than that, it's like, I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid that I'm that person that I don't want to be. I'm afraid I'm not as far along in the process as I thought I was, right? That fear creates the
being judged. Yep.
Right. And, this is like, listening to you talk, it's very apparent to me why you're such a gravity well for lost souls. Like when we were at the event, like, I talked and I amped people up, right? Because I'm a very intense personality. Like, I'm very intense. You're very disarming, right? Like, you're a lot softer than me in your approach, because you've gone through these spiritual journeys and you've come out much more palatable, right? Like, you're very palatable. Whereas mine, I'm I teach confidence and self-respect and courage, right? So, like, those are very hardcore, intense constructs that I'm teaching men to step up and speak up, and therefore I carry myself accordingly. Whereas like I explained to you after we left, like, I'm very aware of the people I roll with. So, like, when I'm away from you, I'm still like observing you to make sure. That's just that hypervigilance that you get from Marine Corps. Like, you're constantly aware. I rolled with these 5 people. I know where every single person is, who they're talking to, and where our exit strategy is. And when I need to move to them, I know exactly where to move. So, like,
it was funny how we kind of both just gravitated around the group to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. So we're like checking perimeter and making sure we have 360, and we knew where each other was at all times, right? Like, we rolled together, so we'd leave together. So the cool thing about that is some guys, they get weird about it, right? They're like, oh, that's paranoia. It's like, it's not paranoia. It's a tool set. If you use it properly, it's a tool set. And the cool thing is you were my priority because we rolled together, right? So we're there together. And as my priority, I'm keeping an eye on you. You're keeping an eye on me. We were constantly in eye communication with each other. Like, I'm moving here, you're moving there. Like, we knew exactly where each other was going, and we'd come back and we'd converge at some point or another. But the beauty of that was I got to watch you be the gravity well. And these people who were kind of like kind of sad and like kind of awkward and like, I don't want to be here. I don't know anybody. They'd move to you, get sucked into the gravity well. You'd have a group of people talking, and everybody would leave you as a beaming like light source. Like, they would just be happier, right? So I got to watch this out in real time. And if you're aware, you can cognizant, you can see what was happening. And effectively what was happening is you're so disarming, right? Like, I'm intense. So only a very specific type of person is going to be able to be in my energy for very long before they're like, wow, this guy's fucking nuts. And I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with that. Right. But like most people, they gravitate towards you because they're sinking. Right. They have a sinking feeling. And then you have this disarming way about you where they find you and you're like, no, you're good. And you let, like I tell my guys, because it's courage and self-respect, you borrow my belief. Mm-hmm. So my intensity is like, I believe in myself 100,000%. Like, there's nothing you can say that is going to stop me from doing what I want to do. And people that are lacking confidence, they need that belief. And so they borrow my belief. With you, I feel like the juxtaposition between you and I is we do similar things, but instead of borrowing your belief, they borrow your grace. So they're able to dismantle their own judgment by being in your space because you give them the tools to borrow grace for where they are in the journey. Right? Like, I'm intense and I give belief in that so that they can go and step up or whatever. But with you, it's like, hey, you're on a journey. And it's important to know where you are in the spiritual journey and not try and force things that don't need to be there. And when they would dissipate from you, they would just be amped in a different way. Like, they would be more like open to then spread that same light. And then they'd go to different groups and now those groups would do the same thing. So you were like a gravity well generator, which was pretty fucking cool to watch real time. And the reason I bring that up is because it was just the thought as you were talking, like the juxtaposition between you and I is we do very similar things, just like our means are different. I'm hardcore intensity belief. You're hardcore intensity grace. Like, I will have these conversations so that you can believe that you're good. You're a good person. And I can help you love yourself on that journey. I'm more like, this is how we're going to get results. Like, we're going to get results this way. And so sometimes that's been kind of hard the way we talk to each other, because sometimes you're fucking intense, and sometimes I'm like, dude, you're kind of getting a little woo woo for me, and I don't really like that. It's not the way that I do things. But out of respect for each other and a vision of like, we know the results each other gets because we've been in that space where, right? Like, the cool thing about the den space that we were in is there were 1,500 people there that you and I went and connected, and so it gave us this kind of crash course to watch each other work.
Yep.
So there's a massive amount of results that came out of that very quickly, which allowed us to see each other's methods very easily and find respect for each other. Whereas, like, I know how you work and I can respect the hell out of the way you work. Not for me. And it wouldn't work for me because I need intensity. I can't do well, it's okay, you're on this journey. No, I need to know where I'm going. Then I'm going to run at it and I'm going to fucking take care of it. So the devil's advocate part is like, listening to you talk, my mind immediately goes to, how do you keep people from staying too long without results? Right? Like, you talk about, like, there's going to be a little bit of wallowing. What's the threshold? Where it's no longer serving them and it's starting to impede their efficacy. Is there a threshold in your mind, or is it more like you need to go through whatever process is process, right? Like I say, there is no right or wrong path. There's only the path. So is it so bespoke within your clientele that different people will wallow longer? Or just curious your thoughts on that as you're talking.
Sure. That's actually a really good question. And everyone responds differently, right? Like, I guess, as I've kind of looked back and thought about the people I've helped, it's a mindset, right? It really is a mindset and what people are willing to do. I want to make one comment about kind of what you were talking about is this, we do kind of very similar things. It's like, you're right. Mine's very different. I'm the healer guy that's going to patch you up, but then you're going to go show someone how to swing a battle axe, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but it's really a mindset, right? I've
Usually back in
had
the fight,
people,
I'll just make sure that they're good at what they do.
right? I sell you mana potions, right, and health potions, but um,
World changers.
it's about a mindset where, sometimes people will, I'll show them these amazing things about themselves, right? I'll show them, like, there's a little trick where I can show you how to make your kind of hand bigger and feel this energy moving through you and get you past these stuck points. But it's on that person to, kind of go forward. And again, going into that dark, it's kind of scary. But I guess what I find most often is if people feel like they're wallowing too long in one spot, it's that they've gotten so far into their trauma, but now they're stuck with some other mindset, right? So, if you were to talk to, let's just use a war veteran as an example, right? They go to this terrible place, they come back, they have whatever trauma from what they've experienced, right? And so if you were to kind of walk them through this process of, okay, well, let's look at this situation or this situation and give yourself some grace, there's still these other connected memories that are providing power to that belief system. So there's, sometimes it's very multifaceted. Like, well, what still got you stuck there? And it's like, okay, well, there was this one time where this happened and this happened because that was a different stuck point, right? It's almost like if you were to sit there and try and pull yourself out of a spider's web, it's like, aha, my arm's free. Like I guess that's what I do with clients. It's like, I just show you how to kind of get unstuck and then how to start cutting away the webs. But I mean, that's tiring, right? And you've got a mortgage, you've got, your Netflix subscription or your car payment. And, it's sometimes very easy for people to just be like, and then sit back down. Right. And so, hey, what stopped you? Well, that other thing over there is really shitty. And it's just, okay, how are you looking at it? Right. And if there's that problem over there, how can we change perspective on that? And so it's, again, I like to liken these things to a video game because it's very much so the same. You get so far down a path, you run into a boss you don't know how to beat. Like, have you ever played Dark Souls 3? It's like ridiculously hard, right? So you have to sit there and time all of your different jumps, your rolls, your attacks, and you have to figure out each enemy you encounter. You have to figure out how to dodge around that and best that enemy to get that experience. And it's kind of the same way when people are when they're exploring their trauma, they'll get so far and then they've hit a stuck point because they're not sure how to look at it. They're not sure how to, take this event and say, well, gosh, what positive could have possibly come out of that? And so it's like, okay, well, let's change perspective and then try and see that in a different light. Right. And then that then gets them a little further. I've had, people I've talked to and they've had kind of that aha moment and then just went right back into never changing at all and not having that desire. And I've had other people that, were so excited when they've learned things they have not stopped and, constantly hearing updates like, oh man, I kept chasing this down and I kept chasing this down. And I found out it was this weird thing that happened to me when I was little. And for whatever stupid reason, I kept hanging on to it. So really it's just about communication, right? Like you said, we talk or we think through talking, right?
Yep.
And so as you're sitting there talking to someone, even if you're just trying to share something and who cares if you sound stupid, but just kind of start talking through this shit. And then you're going to figure, oh man, that is weird. That's weird that happened. Oh man. And then someone says, oh God, why do you care about that? I don't know. Right. And it's just that question, that new perspective. Wait, why do I care about that? Who gives a shit that Susie said my shoes were stupid? You know what I mean? Like it makes no difference. So I guess, the Cliff Notes version is absolutely everyone is different in how they process their trauma, but it's really a factor of, how ready are you to run at it? Yeah. Can you risk
that's
just
the similarity
unwinding and falling apart to really get through that dark room?
Yeah, those are those. As you're talking, the similarities in what we do is very, very much like how we handle people, right? Like you have to meet them where they are. I'm a very big believer in that. Like I may be really intense, but that intensity is varied a little bit based on where I think somebody is, right? Like there's been plenty of clients where I'm like, dude, you're not ready for me to be your coach because you're just going to get frustrated with yourself because I'm going to hold you accountable and then you're going to resent me. I'm not going to have you as a client that way. And I've let many clients go for that reason where I'm just like, yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you have to get good at analyzing and knowing whether or not they're willing to drink. Like, are they in a capacity to actually take in the information? Otherwise, you're just doing them a disservice. And that's kind of how I look at the similarities of what we're doing. Is like you said, there's people that I've given the information to, and they take it and they run with it, and then there's other people I give them the information, and they just kind of they get overwhelmed or they get disheartened because
Yep.
they use it as a reason why they're still stuck. And
Exactly.
like thinking about that kind of segues really well into the other chapter that I wanted to talk about, which I think they're right next to each other, which is the man behind the curtain.
Currently.
Right? Yeah. So one of the things that you just said that I really liked was there are some people who like the mindset shift is instant, and then other people, it takes a little bit, right? And liking it to video games, right? Every boss has a different strategy. So like every life event has a different strategy. And so what I like to teach is confidence in yourself to deal with every boss, no matter what the strategy is. You have the skill set to be, to challenge yourself, to audit yourself in a way where you have the tools to, no matter what the boss's framework is, you know how to pick it apart, audit it, and find the way around it, find the strategy. And what you were saying is that, every boss has a different strategy, so everybody's going to approach it a little bit differently. It sounds to me like yours is a lot more individual based on the experience that then you leverage that to lead to people's confidence in being able to handle future experiences. Whereas mine, it's like I focus entirely on that person, not so much the past, where they are today, and then building them into the person that they want to be so that they can handle every boss no matter what. I don't even care what bosses are out there. I'm trying to create bulletproof confidence in that person so they can go up to the last boss or the first boss and they have the same level of confidence and calm demeanor going against that challenge. It sounds like yours is very linked to their experience with that shadow work. Like you have to dive into that.
Very much so. Again, gaming analogies, right? So if you've played, we'll just pick on Ninja Gaiden. Okay, you played the original Ninja Gaiden on Super Nintendo. You'll know there's certain levels, and you got to jump over shurikens, and you've got to do all these things, right? So let's say you're playing Ninja Gaiden, and I'm over here playing Super Mario Brothers. Your experience of Ninja Gaiden isn't necessarily going to help me in Super Mario Brothers, and Super Mario Brothers isn't necessarily going to help you in Ninja Gaiden, right? Whereas, trauma, I have I've had a lot of experience in my life, right? So it's almost like I've played a lot of the different video games. You're right. I can't help every single person. I can't tell you everything that's, ever happened. I've been through it. Not at all. Not at all. What I'm saying is I've played enough of these video games, all the different video games, and seen enough of the bosses that there's some principles that kind of hold true, right? It's a game that you picked, right? And I won't go, too far down the rabbit hole, but you got to know that you're the hero and you're the enemy in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. So now how do you write that empowering moment of like, hey, you kind of are the man behind the curtain in all of this. So now with that information, kind of like what you talk about, that confidence, you kind of build them up, show them that they can do this, but it's more, now with that, let's look at your situation and, for this level, you actually have to do a double jump and then do a zoom over, and then you're going to get on that platform. Oh yeah, I've seen that game before. You actually have to run up behind them, then jump behind them, and then, do this kind of back attack. And I know that's kind of, not a very detailed analogy as it were, but
I think it's a solid analogy. And I would challenge that it's not true what you said, right? Like if you play Super Mario, it's not going to help you in Ninja Gaiden. You know what the jump button is. You know what the hit button is. You know how a platformer works. You know how to pause, right? Like
fair.
To your point,
there are principles that,
right? Like to your point, like I thought it was a really good analogy because where I would challenge is that they won't help. They will help. Like just because you experience Super Mario Brothers, you're going to be farther along in the process of hand-eye coordination and what buttons do what and how the controller works and how to turn the damn game on and off than somebody who's never touched a video game ever in their life, right? And
very true, yeah.
With that analogy, right? Like a gamer is a very different person than a non-gamer. Their brains just psychologically, we've seen it in clinical psychology and neurology, like the brains just fire different. The synapses are different. They're wired different altogether. And so the same thing goes, in my opinion, to take that over to trauma, right? Like I have a lot of conversations because I've had trauma with people who have had trauma. And the reality is, like, people that have trauma have a hard time relating to people who've never had trauma because we are wired differently, right? Like we're expecting the other shoe to drop when you have trauma. And the person who's never had trauma is like, the world is rainbows, right? It's to go back full circle to what you were saying earlier. It's young Aaron who is all peace, love, and rainbows, never going into the military, versus
Right.
Aaron who is in the military. The juxtaposition between those two people is a massive disconnect. Not right or wrong, not a judgment on the old one was worse or better or the new one,
Sure.
but completely different.
Completely different.
And so looking at, that analogy of the gaming is like, what you said is absolutely true. You may not know the boss you're fighting. You may not know the game you're playing. But if you know the basic core principles of the jump button, the hit button, the run button, the movement, it may take you a couple tries, but those fundamentals are going to carry over, right? Maybe in one game it's a single jump, and in the next game it's a double jump, right? Maybe one is a ranged and one is a melee, right? Like you can sort of capture and encapsulate those formulaic parts of a video game in the trauma process, right? No matter what, you're going to have to deal with it. No matter what, you're not in a place you like. No matter what, you want to get to a place where you do like. Those are formulaic. Now, Aaron's going to give you the tools to be like, okay, here's how you sit there without judgment, right? Here's how you sit there with the grace that you're not farther along in the process. Because that's, in my experience, 95% of the problem people have when it comes to judgment of themselves is believing they should be farther in their path of resolution and or curing and or reconciliation than they actually are, which then does a number of, very deep like issues with hurdles like to their resolution, right? Like you were saying earlier, those self-induced limiting beliefs, right? And the reason I bring that up is because that's kind of like the man behind the curtain that you were talking about, that we've talked about very, very much. Once you see it, once you see the formulaic part of it, it doesn't really matter and you can't turn it off.
Right. What has been seen cannot be unseen.
Exactly. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. And so, like, as we're wrapping up, because I'm going to start wrapping up here, one of the things that I think this really highlights in my mind is find you a wizard like Aaron. Because I've watched it happen like real time, right? Like when we were there, you helped a number of people, right? So I'm not just trying to blow smoke because you're my buddy or anything like that. Like I watched results happen. I know some of the people you're talking about where you handed them the free advice and they went and, built a life off of that free advice and then came back to you multiple times and said, okay, I did that. What now? Right. Yep. So like when you have a wizard who's like, it's dangerous out there, take this, right, which is in the book, you are much better equipped to go through the process. Because even if he doesn't know the exact boss you're fighting, he will know the jump button, the slash button, and the move button. And he'll be able to tell you whether or not you're even playing the right game. Because most people are probably playing the wrong fucking game. Right?
Absolutely. And I guess quickly, right, is back to that Mario example. Mario level 1-1, when you're running up and there's that Goomba and it hits you and then you got to restart. And often people, when we go through these experiences in life that are very cyclic, oh man, why do I always have a boyfriend or a girlfriend that treats me like this? Or why do I always, that this happens to me? That's like Mario running up to that Goomba every single time and just running into the Goomba. And it's like, oh man, why does this Goomba keep killing me? And you're right. Like what I do, I just walk up and I'm like, hey, you just got to jump over it.
Yeah.
Oh, snap. Oh shit. And then you go to the next part and I've got to figure out how to get over this, tube, but they learned how to jump so they could probably get over that one. So you're right. It's very much so just like, walking up and seeing people in these kind of routines that they find themselves. And it's like, hey, first off, you're a player in this game. Just wake up to if you see these patterns, there's something you're missing, right? If you keep running into the same Goomba, you're not supposed to do that. So what are you supposed to learn out of that? Oh, you got to jump for that one, right? And so kind of similar, right? People come to me and it's like, hey, this is the kind of cycle I find myself in, and it's, well, shit, try this combo, jump over it like that.
It's very much, it's very much the beatings will continue until morale improves, right?
Right.
Right. Like that's effectively what's happening until you reframe that life is happening for you, not to you. You will
Right.
continue to get crashed against the rocks because you're not learning how to sail the ship. You're
You
just
decided to play Mario,
rocks
fucking
and
have some
getting
fun
into
with
ship.
it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, wrapping up real quick, because we're running out of time here, and I want to be real respectful of your time.
No worries.
Something that I'm working on my cycle is I go overtime constantly because I love having these conversations more selfishly than anything. Um, but for the people that watch and listen, like I love to give them something tangible that they can walk away with and they can actually start implementing. Right. So if there's like 1 to 3 tips that you can give people, maybe somebody who's in a dark spot, who's going through trauma, who's trying to level up and has maybe seen a little bit of the man behind the curtain, but don't really know. Are there like 1 to 3 things that you can give like quick hit that they can help with some of that formulaic stuff? Or is it truly just purely bespoke and you won't be able to help anybody unless you get a conversation with them?
No. The biggest thing is really sit down. And I know this sounds cliche, right? This sounds cliche, but I can't even tell you how important it is you got to sit with yourself and be quiet, right? Like God lives in silence kind of thing. Seriously, go sit down and just start exploring those emotions, right? There's a lot of the good principle. Number 2 is anytime someone does something that upsets you, before that judgment comes in and your kind of emotions take you on a roller coaster, why do I care, right? Like, and that's not like a not to say pass it off, like who gives a shit. No, why do I care? Like, what about that bothers me? Because that's going to show you a lot about yourself, right? Carl Jung talked about that. Things that irritate us in others reveal something about ourselves. And then, third tip is, have grace for where you're at, right? You did not know, there's no way you could have known the things you know now when whatever it was happened to you. Like, it's impossible. You could not have known. So just try and look at it as, okay, what happened? What lesson can I glean from that? How do I make myself better because that happened to me? Like that is I guess the best thing, the best way you can look at anything that's ever happened to you. How am I better because of it? Fuck all the circumstances, fuck all the other characters. How am I better? Right. And I would say absolutely. Like, if you're really curious, I highly encourage everyone to start going through your shadow work. Find those skeletons that are weighing you down, dump them out of your closet, and just start, looting them. Loot them for everything they're worth. And if you want help, right? Like that's what I do. I take people through this. We talk about kind of where you're at, and I give them some good jump moves or some good combo moves to go forward and just kind of get out of those cycles. Stop running into the same damn Goombas, every time they respawn.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll definitely get your information down in the podcast description. So if you guys are interested in working with Aaron, I've seen him help a lot of people. I can personally vouch for him as far as his credibility goes. And definitely grab his book. It's $10. A lot of great information in here. You can get it on Amazon. I picked it up. I'm halfway through it right now. And so, one of the things that you said that I want to encourage everybody to do is take an intentional and active role in your hero's journey, in your story, in your game, to keep with the metaphors. It is one of the number one things that people struggle with the way that victim culture is, with the way that a lot of the kind of dodging of responsibility that we've kind of glorified in society today, something that I'm a big preacher on, is take responsibility and actively
Yep.
develop yourself as the hero of your journey, and become intentional about that. And then when you get to a point where you're stuck, find a wizard like Aaron, find somebody that can help you take that conversation to the next level. Because it doesn't have to be a paid professional either. I would encourage, like, I have my circle of
Sure.
counsel.
Even
They just
best
have a
someone you can truly
30,000 foot
confide
view.
in.
Yeah, they have a 30,000 foot view. And if you trust them, you can share that with them, and they can help you unravel kind of the mystery of what's going on, because they're going to experience you in a different way, from a different angle than this cyclical system up here, where you're just kind of on a closed loop. Get it out, work with somebody. And then if you don't have anybody, find somebody that you can talk to, and kind of get that 30,000 foot view from. But definitely pick up the book. I know he shares a lot of good resources on his Facebook and on his Instagram, so I'll definitely get that in here as well. Um, Aaron, thank you for your time. Are there any big projects that you're working on right now? Anything that you got kind of in the fire that you might want people to know about?
Absolutely. So, I've got my kind of coaching packages available. The book just came out. What I'm really wanting to do is make a game out of real life, right? Like so that's something I'm actively working on, trying to get going. Is we're going to build a game for real life that you can actually level up and get these tools to face down your trauma. And like you said, even if you're talking to someone else, like just kind of putting it out there and dumping your skeletons out, right? So um, a more systematic way to do that's also fun and rewarding, to keep people kind of addicted to their own growth and just beating their own levels, instead of just running into, like I said, running into the same Goombas.
And that's what we've talked about, right? Like, because it was funny, because you and I kind of had that same idea on different. You and I have always really been on the same wavelength since we met. So, like,
Yes.
always within a couple of days of each other, we'll call each other and be like, "All right, I had this idea. That's crazy, because I just had that
I
idea
was
too."
just
So
thinking about that.
yeah, so gamification is one of those things where, why do we escape to video games, which originally echoed life, right? All of
Mm-hmm.
it in video games echoes life. The progression, the experience, the hard work, the dedication, the grinding, like, it was all built to echo real life. But why is it that we like video game gamification, not life gamification? And you and I were talking about this. It's about effort versus reward, right? Like, there's that resonation that I can work for 20 minutes and get a trophy and a triumph, and I can get progression, and I can see the bar fill up. So, that's something that you and I are going to partner with each other over the next, several months, figuring out how we can kind of leverage each other's kind of ideas on that, because I'm doing something similar with Heroes. You're doing something with your Souls on Fire. So I'm really excited for the next few months of that conversation, to try and build that out, because I think that there's a lot to be done and a lot to be said about taking the video game, which was originally echoing life, and making life echo the video game, to get us back to a fundamental state where we enjoy the dignity of hard work, we enjoy the grind, we enjoy the blood, sweat, and tears that we're willing to do with no risk for video games with no reward, and put it into our real world, and really create our own hero's journey in a way that is effective in our dopamine hits, and keeps us grounded, and keeps us feeling fulfilled. And I'm really excited that you and I have started to partner with that discussion, because we've already chased that rabbit down a number of rabbit holes, with a lot of cool things coming out of that. So I'm really excited to see how yours progresses, and how you bring that to the space of shadow work, and addressing trauma, and helping others live a life that you yourself has kind of built for yourself, and this kind of peace that you have spiritually, and then kind of taking that on my side as well, and kind of gamifying the things that I'm trying to build as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation with me.
Thank you for
Obviously,
having me.
I talk for hours almost every other day anyway. So this was just par for the course. And with the book being released, I really wanted people to find you, because I really have seen the benefit of your Gravity Well personality and the support that you bring to people. And so I wanted to give this, you an opportunity to have a platform. And I'm excited for the many more podcasts that you're going to be doing in the future, because I know that, you're just going to get bigger and grow more. And so I'll make sure to include all your information, all your links down below. So please give them a follow, give them a shout out. I highly encourage it. Everybody that I've sent your way has been exponentially better. So much appreciated, sir.
I appreciate that feedback.
Like you didn't know. Don't be fucking humble with me. Like that.
Well, duh. You know what I mean? I do appreciate it. I love hearing that. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Reward is part of the gamification, right? And part of that reward
Yes.
is that you've done well, right? So again, thanks for joining us on the Heroes Veritas podcast. I'm your host, Tim Bass. Aaron Thorpe, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for writing this book, and looking forward to and excited for the growth over the coming months and years. And as always, if you like the content that we bring, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Be sure to join the mailing list. We have a lot of cool stuff coming down the pike, especially over the next 2 months. Some really cool benefits coming out to you guys, some of them coming out of this conversation. So as always, love you guys. We grow only as much as you let us grow, and we'll check you next time on Heroes Veritas.